Hey legends, welcome back to Mad Historian, where history isn't just old, it's absolutely thorough. Tonight, we're throwing you straight into the dirt, the cold, and the chaos, because we're answering a question your school textbooks totally skipped. What the hell did cavemen actually do all day? Spoiler, it wasn't just rock smashing and mammoth chasing. We're talking survival hacks with zero Wi-Fi, prehistoric parenting with no diapers, and drama that makes reality TV look tame. But before we drag you back to 30,000 BC, smash that like button like it's a flint rock and hit subscribe only if you're into raw, messy, and brutally honest history that makes you say, wait, they did what? Also, drop a comment with where you're watching from and what ungodly hour it is. We love our little tribe of time travelers from across the globe. Alright, get cozy or don't, because it's about to get cold, hungry, and kinda terrifying. Because tonight, you're not just learning about cavemen. You are one. You wake up on a bed of damp leaves, your breath fogging in the frozen air. Your stomach growls louder than a saber-tooth outside. The fire went out hours ago. Your kid is crying. Your mate is still out hunting. And if you don't move now, you're not making it to sundown. Welcome to the Stone Age, baby. You wake up 40,000 years ago, and the first sound you hear is your own child screaming. Not from hunger or fear, but from the ritual scarification your tribe performs on every infant's third sunrise. The shaman's obsidian blade carves symbols into tender flesh while the mother sings a lullaby that hasn't changed in 1,000 generations. This is your morning routine in the Paleolithic era, and it's about to get much stranger. The cave paintings at Lascaux reveal that Cro-Magnon humans didn't just survive. They created elaborate daily rituals that would horrify modern parents. Archaeological evidence from sites like Dolny Vistanis shows that these early humans spent their first waking hours engaged in activities that combined survival with ceremonies so brutal they bordered on torture. The infant mortality rate was 40%, but those who survived were marked, literally and figuratively, for life. Your day begins before dawn, not with coffee or breakfast, but by checking the placement of human skulls around your sleeping area. The Kavz's cave sites in Israel revealed that early humans arranged the skulls of their dead in specific patterns around their bedding. Supernatural security system that was believed to keep evil spirits at bay while they slept. The skulls weren't just any skulls. They were the heads of tribal elders, carefully prepared through a process that took weeks. But the screaming child isn't the only sound echoing through your cave. There's something else, a rhythmic pounding that seems to come from the earth itself. Archaeological evidence from the Blombos Cave in South Africa shows that early humans created the world's first musical instruments 70,000 years ago. But they weren't used for entertainment. They were used for something far more disturbing, summoning the spirits of the recently deceased to guide the living through their daily tasks. You stumble toward the sound, your feet finding the worn grooves in the cave floor that countless generations have carved with their daily movements. The Neanderthal sites at Shanadar Cave in Iraq reveal that these pathways weren't random. They were deliberate, sacred routes that connected different areas of daily life. Every step you take has been taken by your ancestors, and every step will be taken by your descendants, creating a hypnotic pattern of human movement that spans millennia. As you approach the source of the pounding, you realize it's not coming from a drum or a tool. It's coming from your grandmother, who is systematically crushing the bones of yesterday's kill to extract the marrow. But she's not doing it for nutrition. She's doing it for something much more primal. The bone marrow was believed to contain the memories of the animal, and consuming it would grant the tribe the creature's hunting instincts for the day ahead. The child's screaming has stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that makes your skin crawl. You know what this means, and you know what comes next, but nothing could prepare you for the ritual that's about to unfold. The silence means the child has entered the sacred trance state that every tribal member must experience before they can participate in the day's activities. You watch as the shaman places droplets of animal blood on the infant's forehead, creating patterns that match the paintings surrounding your sleeping area. This isn't primitive superstition. It's a complex, neurological conditioning technique that anthropologists are only beginning to understand. Recent discoveries at the Hohlfels cave in Germany reveal that early humans performed daily blood rituals that served multiple purposes, marking tribal hierarchy, sharing disease immunities, and creating psychological bonds stronger than any modern team-building exercise. The blood wasn't just symbolic, it was functional. Different blood types were mixed to create a primitive form of vaccination, protecting the tribe from diseases that would otherwise wipe them out. You feel the warm liquid dripping onto your own skin as the shaman marks you for the day's role. Today, you're designated as a bone reader, someone who will interpret the patterns in yesterday's leftover bones to determine where the tribe should hunt. The accuracy of these predictions, preserved in bone arrangements found at Terra Amata in France, was unerringly high. Archaeological evidence suggests that early humans achieved hunting success rates of 78% using these bone-reading techniques. The ceremony continues with each family member receiving their daily marking. But you notice something disturbing about your father's forehead. The blood pattern is different, more complex, with additional symbols that you've never seen before. The shaman whispers something in his ear that makes his face go pale, and suddenly you understand. Today is the day your father will attempt to commune with the animal spirits directly, a ritual that has a 30% survival rate. As the dawn light filters through the cave entrance, you see the true scope of your daily reality. The walls around you aren't just decorated with hunting scenes. They're covered with handprints, thousands of them, each representing a tribal member who participated in the Blood Dawn ceremony. The Cueva de los Menos in Argentina contains over 900 handprints, each one a testament to a human who faced the same morning ritual you're experiencing now. But there's something wrong with some of the handprints. Many of them are missing fingers. Not from accidents or disease, but from deliberate amputation. The Cavemen culture practiced ritual finger removal as part of their daily spiritual routine. Believing that physical sacrifice would ensure successful hunting, you look down at your own hands, knowing that before this day is over, you might lose a finger yourself. The shaman approaches you with a sharp flint blade, and you realize that the Blood Dawn ceremony isn't just about marking, it's about testing. Each day, every member of the tribe must prove their worthiness to participate in the communal activities that keep everyone alive. The test is simple. Endure pain without crying out, or be excluded from the day's hunt and left to starve. Your grandmother finishes crushing the bones and begins distributing the marrow mixture to the adults. The taste is unlike anything you could imagine, metallic, bitter, but somehow addictive. Within minutes, you feel your senses sharpening. Your awareness is expanding. The marrow isn't just nutrition. It's a primitive psychoactive substance that enhances hunting abilities and creates a shared consciousness among the tribe. As the ceremony reaches its climax, you notice something that chills you to the bone. The shaman is preparing additional blood markings, but these aren't for the living. They're for the mummified remains of tribal members who died in the past month, who will be carried along on today's hunt to provide spiritual guidance. You're about to spend your entire day accompanied by the preserved corpses of your ancestors. And somehow, this feels completely normal. The sun is now fully visible through the cave entrance, and you know that the real day is about to begin. But first, there's one more ritual to complete, one that will determine whether you survive until tomorrow's dawn. You feel your stomach cramping as the shaman announces the day's hunting assignments. But this isn't ordinary hunger. It's the deliberate starvation protocol that every healthy adult must endure before a hunt. Archaeological evidence from the Atapuerca sites in Spain reveals that early humans practiced controlled fasting that pushed their bodies to the brink of starvation, believing that extreme hunger would sharpen their predatory instincts. The assignment ritual is brutal in its simplicity. Each tribal member must reach into a leather pouch containing animal teeth, and whatever creature's tooth they draw determines their role for the day. You close your eyes and feel around the pouch, your fingers touching what feels like dozens of sharp, jagged objects. When you pull out a massive cave bear tooth, the tribe falls silent. You've just been selected for the most dangerous job of all, tracking the apex predators that could easily kill you. But the tooth selection isn't random. It's based on a complex understanding of human psychology and survival that modern researchers are only beginning to appreciate. The shamans at sites like Mezhmeskaya Cave in Russia practiced a form of psychological conditioning that used ritualized fear to enhance human performance. By forcing individuals to confront their deepest terrors on a daily basis, they created hunters who were essentially immune to panic. Your cave bear assignment means you'll spend the day tracking animals that weigh 1,500 pounds and have no natural predators except humans. The Pleistocene cave bears discovered at Drachenlog Cave in Switzerland show evidence of systematic hunting by early humans. But the kill sites reveal something disturbing. The humans weren't just hunting these creatures for food. They were hunting them for their dreams. The shaman explains your specific task, while the rest of the tribe prepares for their own assignments. You must find a cave bear's winter den, approach close enough to smell its breath, and return with a sample of the moss that grows in the bear's sleeping area. This moss, when burned and inhaled, produces vivid hallucinations that the tribe believes grant access to the animal's memory and hunting knowledge. The catch? Cave bears are light sleepers, and approaching one's den has a 50% fatality rate. As you prepare for the hunt, you notice the other tribal members receiving their assignments with varying degrees of terror and acceptance. The woman next to you draws a mammoth tooth and immediately begins weeping, not from fear, but from relief. Mammoth hunting is dangerous, but predictable, unlike the psychological warfare of bear stalking. The man across from you draws a human tooth, marking him for the most disturbing assignment of all, tracking other human tribes to steal their hunting grounds. The hunger cramping intensifies as the shaman distributes the day's hunting medicine, a mixture of fermented berries, ground bones, and plant extracts that create a mild hallucinogenic effect. Archaeological analysis of coprolites, fossilized feces from Paisley Caves in Oregon, reveals that early humans regularly consumed psychoactive substances before hunting, not for recreational purposes, but to enhance their sensory perception and reduce their fear response. You swallow the bitter mixture and feel your consciousness beginning to shift. Colors become more vivid, sounds more distinct, and most unsettling. Of all, you begin to sense the presence of animals that aren't visibly there. The shamans call this ghost hunting, the ability to track prey through their psychic impressions. Rather than their physical traces, modern hunters would call it madness, but for your tribe, it's an essential survival skill. As the hunting party prepares to leave the cave, you realize that the tooth selection ceremony has created something unprecedented. A group of humans who are about to spend their entire day in a state of controlled terror, enhanced by psychoactive substances, armed with primitive weapons, and motivated by the knowledge that failure means death for the entire tribe. The cave paintings at Chauvet Cave in France depict these hunting scenes with an accuracy that suggests the artists were documenting their own nightmares. The sun is now high enough to cast shadows, and you know that the real test of the day is about to begin. But as you step toward the cave entrance, you notice something that makes your blood run cold. The shadow patterns on the cave floor aren't random. They're forming shapes that look suspiciously like the animal tracks you're supposed to be following. Either the spirits are guiding you, or you're about to walk into a trap that your ancestors have been setting for thousands of years. The hunting party moves toward the entrance, and you realize that everything you've experienced so far has been preparation for something far more terrifying than you could have imagined. You step outside the cave and immediately understand why your ancestors chose this particular location for their daily hunts. The landscape before you isn't just a wilderness. It's a carefully mapped psychological battlefield where every rock, tree, and shadow has been studied and categorized according to its ability to conceal predators or reveal prey. The Dolní Věstonice site in the Czech Republic shows evidence of this systematic environmental manipulation dating back 26,000 years. The shadow patterns you noticed in the cave weren't supernatural. They were the result of a sophisticated understanding of light and darkness that allowed early humans to predict animal movement with uncanny accuracy. Your tribe has spent generations positioning reflective stones and carved surfaces to create shadow maps that change throughout the day, effectively turning the entire hunting ground into a massive sundial that tracks both time and prey location. As you follow the designated path toward the cave bear territory, you notice that your fellow hunters are walking in single file, each person stepping exactly in the footprints of the person ahead. This isn't just for stealth. It's a safety protocol developed over centuries of tracking apex predators. The lead hunter is responsible for detecting trap hazards. The second hunter watches for aerial predators. And you, bringing up the rear, are responsible for monitoring the psychological state of the hunting party. Your job, as the rear guard, is more complex than it initially appears. Early humans discovered that prolonged exposure to danger creates a specific type of madness that can spread through a hunting party like a contagion. The bone tools found at Spy Cave in Belgium show evidence of ritual scarification that served as a primitive form of psychological monitoring. Hunters would carve shallow cuts into their arms throughout the day, and the pattern of bleeding would indicate their mental state to other party members. The landscape begins to change as you approach the cave bear territory, and you realize that your ancestors have been subtly modifying this environment for generations. Certain trees have been deliberately scarred to create sound chambers that amplify the breathing of sleeping bears. Stone arrangements channel wind patterns to carry scent information over long distances. Most disturbing of all, the Cro-Magnon hunters have been leaving deliberate food offerings in specific locations to train the bears to follow predictable routes. You begin to understand the true horror of what you're about to attempt. This isn't just hunting. It's a form of psychological manipulation that has been refined over thousands of years. Your tribe has been slowly conditioning the local bear population to behave in ways that make them easier to approach and study. The bears don't realize they're being manipulated, but they've been unconsciously participating in their own surveillance. For generations, the hunting party pauses at a predetermined signal point, and you notice that the lead hunter is examining something that makes his face go pale. Carved into a nearby tree is a fresh mark that wasn't there during yesterday's hunt, symbol that indicates another human tribe has been operating in this territory. The implications are terrifying. Either you're about to encounter competitors who might kill you on sight, or you're walking into a deliberate trap. The psychological pressure of the situation begins to affect the hunting party in ways that would be impossible to explain to modern humans. The constant awareness of potential death creates a hypervigilant state that enhances sensory perception, but also produces vivid hallucinations. You begin to see animal shapes in cloud formations. Hear footsteps that aren't there, and most unnervingly, smell the distinct odor of cave bear, even though you're still miles from their territory. As you continue following the trail, you notice that the ground beneath your feet is marked with patterns that seem to shift and change as you walk. The Neanderthal sites at Krapina in Croatia reveal that early humans created optical illusions in their hunting grounds using carefully arranged stones and vegetation. These visual tricks served multiple purposes: disorienting prey animals, creating landmarks that were invisible to competing tribes, and testing the psychological stability of hunting party members. The sun reaches its midday position, and you realize that the shadow patterns are about to change in ways that will either reveal your quarry or expose your hunting party to mortal danger. The lead hunter signals for absolute silence, and you know that the next few minutes will determine whether you return to the cave with the sacred moss or become food for the very creatures you're attempting to study. But as you prepare for the final approach to the cave bear territory, you notice something that makes your heart race with terror. The carved symbols on the trees aren't just territorial markers. They're a countdown. Someone or something has been tracking your hunting party's progress, and you're about to discover who's really being hunted. The silence is broken by a sound that chills you to the bone, the rhythmic breathing of something massive echoing through the forest. But this isn't the breathing of a single cave bear. It's the synchronized respiratory pattern of an entire pack, something that modern zoologists would consider impossible. The Pleistocene hunting sites at Cima de los Huesos in Spain reveal that early humans discovered cave bears, engaging in collective hibernation behaviors that created natural amplification chambers. You follow the breathing sounds toward a rocky outcrop that seems to pulse with each exhalation. The lead hunter signals for the party to split up, and you realize that this moment has been rehearsed countless times in the safety of the cave. Each hunter knows exactly where to position themselves to monitor different aspects of the bear den without alerting the occupants. Your specific assignment is to approach the main entrance and collect the hallucinogenic moss while the bears are in their deepest sleep cycle. The approach to the cave mouth requires a technique that your tribe calls shadow walking, a method of movement that synchronizes your heartbeat and breathing with the natural rhythms of the sleeping bears. Archaeological evidence from the Azak cave in Armenia shows that early humans developed this technique over thousands of years, learning to literally become part of the cave ecosystem during the most dangerous phases of their hunts. As you inch closer to the cave entrance, you begin to smell something that goes beyond the typical bear odor. It's a complex mixture of fermented vegetation, animal musk, and something else that you can't identify but that makes your skin crawl. The moss you're seeking doesn't just grow in the bear's sleeping area. It feeds on the unique chemical environment created by the bear's hibernation process, producing psychoactive compounds that exist nowhere else in nature. The cave mouth looms before you, and you can see the faint outline of massive shapes in the darkness. The bears are arranged in a specific pattern that seems almost ritualistic, each animal positioned to share body heat while maintaining access to the cave's air circulation. The Chauvet cave paintings depict this exact formation, suggesting that early humans studied and documented these hibernation arrangements with scientific precision. You reach the edge of the moss growth and your fingers touch the spongy, phosphorescent vegetation that will either grant your tribe enhanced hunting abilities or kill you with its toxic properties. The moss must be harvested using a specific technique that involves scraping only the surface layer while leaving the root system intact. Too much pressure, and the moss releases spores that will wake the bears immediately. Too little, and you won't collect enough material for the tribe's daily needs. The harvesting process requires you to maintain physical contact with the cave wall while simultaneously monitoring the breathing patterns of the sleeping bears. Any change in their respiratory rhythm indicates that they're beginning to wake up, giving you approximately 30 seconds to retreat before they become fully alert. The bone tools found at Vindija Cave in Croatia were specifically designed for this type of precision work, with surface textures that allowed hunters to feel microscopic changes in the moss structure. As you carefully scrape the moss into your collection pouch, you become aware of something that makes your blood run cold. One of the bears is not breathing in sync with the others. Its respiratory pattern is different, faster, more irregular, suggesting that it's either sick or beginning to wake up. The shamans taught you that a sick bear is more dangerous than a healthy one, because illness makes them unpredictable and eliminates their natural fear of humans. The moss collection is nearly complete when you hear a sound that every hunter fears: the soft scraping of claws against stone. One of the bears is stirring, and you have perhaps 20 seconds before it becomes fully alert. The escape protocol is simple in theory, but terrifying in practice. You must retreat from the cave while making no sound, leaving no scent trail, and maintaining visual contact with the stirring bear to predict its next move. You begin the retreat process. Your heart is pounding so loud that you're certain the bears can hear it. The phosphorescent moss in your pouch glows faintly in the darkness, creating a trail of light that could easily attract the attention of a waking predator. The Neanderthal sites at Spy Cave reveal that early humans developed specific breathing techniques to slow their heart rate during these retreat sequences. But the adrenaline coursing through your system makes controlled breathing nearly impossible. As you inch toward the cave entrance, you realize that the stirring bear isn't just waking up, it's positioning itself to block your escape route. The intelligence displayed by these Pleistocene predators was far beyond what modern researchers expected, suggesting that the relationship between early humans and cave bears was more complex than a simple predator-prey dynamic. You're about to discover just how intelligent these creatures really are. The bear's eyes open, and you realize that this creature has been awake the entire time, watching your every move with the patience of a predator that has learned to anticipate human behavior. The Pleistocene megafauna discovered at Rancho La Brea in California shows evidence of adaptive intelligence that allowed these animals to develop counter-strategies against human hunting techniques. This bear hasn't just been sleeping, it's been studying you. The creature rises to its full height, and you understand why your ancestors considered cave bears to be supernatural entities, standing nearly 12 feet tall, with claws longer than your fingers and a bite force that could crush human bones like twigs. This animal represents everything that early humans feared about the natural world. But the most terrifying aspect isn't its size, it's the unmistakable intelligence in its eyes. A cognitive capacity that suggests it understands exactly what you're trying to do. The bear doesn't immediately attack. Instead, it begins a behavior that anthropologists call testing, a series of movements designed to evaluate your responses and determine your level of threat. It shifts its weight from side to side. Watching how you react to each movement, it opens and closes its mouth, testing whether you'll flee at the sight of its teeth. Most unnervingly, it begins to vocalize not roaring or growling, but producing a low, rumbling sound that seems designed to communicate rather than intimidate. You remember the shaman's teachings about bear intelligence. These creatures have been observing human behavior for thousands of years, developing their own understanding of human psychology and hunting patterns. The bone arrangements found at Rigordal Cave in France suggest that cave bears engaged in primitive tool use, manipulating their environment to create advantages during encounters with human hunters. This bear may have been preparing for your arrival long before you entered its territory. The standoff continues as the bear begins to circle you slowly, maintaining eye contact while evaluating your equipment, your body language, and your scent. The moss in your pouch is glowing brighter now, apparently triggered by your adrenaline, and you realize that this phosphorescent display might be serving as a form of communication. The bear's pupils dilate slightly when it sees the glowing moss, suggesting that it recognizes the substance and understands its significance. The other bears in the cave begin to stir, awakened by the subtle changes in their alpha's behavior. You're no longer facing a single predator. You're confronting an entire pack of intelligent people, coordinated hunters who have been expecting your arrival. The cave paintings at Coscar Cave in France depict exactly this scenario, showing human hunters surrounded by bears who appear to be working together to cut off escape routes. The lead bear makes a decision that demonstrates a level of strategic thinking that would impress modern military tacticians. Instead of attacking, immediately, it begins to move in a pattern that forces you toward the deeper sections of the cave, where the other bears are positioning themselves for an ambush. The creature has recognized that killing you quickly would be less advantageous than capturing you alive for study, potentially learning more about human hunting techniques for future encounters. You realize that the intelligence test works both ways. The bear is evaluating your capabilities, but you're also learning about its cognitive processes, social structure, and decision-making patterns. The shaman sent you here not just to collect moss, but to gather intelligence about these creatures that could help your tribe develop better hunting strategies. The question is whether you'll survive long enough to report your findings. The bear's circling pattern becomes tighter, and you notice that it's herding you toward a specific section of the cave, where the floor is covered with the bones of previous visitors. The Denisova cave excavations in Russia reveal that cave bears collected the remains of their prey in specific locations, creating bone arrangements that serve both as territorial markers and as psychological warfare against future intruders. You're standing in a graveyard of failed hunters. As the circle tightens, you prepare to implement the final protocol that the shamans taught you for exactly this situation. It's a technique that requires you to use the bear's intelligence against itself, exploiting its curiosity and cognitive complexity to create an opportunity for escape. The success rate of this technique is unknown, because very few hunters who attempt it survive to report the results. The bear moves closer, and you realize that the next few seconds will determine not just your survival, but the future relationship between your tribe and these intelligent predators. The test is about to reach its climax, and you're about to discover whether humankind can overcome animal intelligence. You remember the shaman's final lesson about cave bear intelligence. These creatures don't just collect bones. They arrange them in patterns that serve as a primitive form of record keeping. The femur in front of your left foot belongs to a hunter from a rival tribe who attempted this same mission 3 seasons ago. The skull near your right hand shows teeth marks that suggest the hunter was alive when the bear began its feeding process. You're standing in a library of failed human attempts, and the bear is the librarian. The technique you're about to attempt requires you to understand the bear's psychological profile based on its bone arrangements. The positioning of human remains in specific patterns indicates that this creature has developed a complex understanding of human anatomy, behavior, and emotional responses. The shamans call this bone reading, and it's the most advanced form of animal psychology that early humans ever developed. You begin the technique by slowly reaching toward the nearest human skull, not to pick it up, but to touch it in a way that demonstrates respect for the previous hunter's sacrifice. The bear's reaction is immediate and surprising. It stops circling and watches intently as you perform what appears to be a funeral ritual. The creature's pupils dilate and its breathing pattern changes, suggesting that it recognizes the ceremonial significance of your actions. The bone arrangement tells a story that chills you to the core. The previous hunter wasn't killed during a failed escape attempt. He was kept alive for an extended period, possibly weeks, while the bear studied his behavior and learned from his responses. The wear patterns on the bones suggest that the hunter was forced to participate in the bear's daily activities, becoming an unwilling research subject in an animal intelligence experiment. You continue the ritual by touching each bone in a specific sequence, following the pattern that the shamans taught you for communicating with apex predators. The bear's reaction becomes more complex as it realizes that you understand the significance of its bone collection. It begins to vocalize again, but this time the sounds are different, less threatening, more curious, as if it's trying to communicate specific information about the bone's histories. The phosphorescent moss in your pouch begins to pulse rhythmically, apparently responding to the chemical signals being released by both you and the bear during this unprecedented communication attempt. The shamans warned you that the moss was more than just a hallucinogen. It was a primitive form of biotechnology that could facilitate interspecies communication under the right circumstances. You're about to discover whether those circumstances exist. The bear approaches closer, and you notice that it's moving with deliberate care to avoid disturbing the bone arrangements. This creature has spent considerable time and energy creating these patterns, and it's protective of its work in ways that suggest artistic or scientific purpose. The cave paintings at Altamira in Spain depict similar scenes of humans and animals engaged in what appears to be collaborative activities, suggesting that these encounters weren't always predatory. As you complete the bone-touching ritual, the bear does something that defies everything you thought you knew about animal behavior. It begins to rearrange the bones in a new pattern, creating a formation that clearly represents a human figure surrounded by multiple bear shapes. The creature is literally drawing a picture using the remains of its victims, demonstrating abstract thinking and symbolic representation that rivals human cognitive abilities. The communication attempt reaches a critical moment when the bear extends one massive paw toward you, claws retracted in what appears to be an invitation to touch. The shaman's teachings didn't prepare you for this possibility. The idea that a cave bear might initiate peaceful contact with a human hunter was considered impossible. You're facing a decision that could revolutionize your tribe's understanding of animal intelligence or result in your immediate death. The other bears in the cave have arranged themselves in a circle around you and the alpha, creating what appears to be a formal gathering rather than an ambush. The moss in your pouch is now glowing so brightly that it's illuminating the entire cave, revealing bone arrangements that extend far beyond what you initially observed. This cave isn't just a den. It's a museum of human-bear interactions spanning possibly hundreds of years. You realize that the intelligence test has evolved into something unprecedented, a diplomatic negotiation between species. The bear is offering you a choice between violence and collaboration, between continuing the ancient cycle of predator-prey relationships or establishing a new form of interspecies communication. The shamans never prepared you for this possibility because they never imagined it could happen. The bear's paw remains extended, waiting for your decision. The bones whisper stories of past hunters who faced similar choices, and you're about to discover whether your decision will add another skull to the collection or create an entirely new chapter in the relationship between humans and the intelligent predators who share their world. You extend your hand toward the bear's paw, and the moment your skin makes contact with its rough pad, you feel an electric sensation that goes beyond simple touch. The phosphorescent moss in your pouch explodes with light, and suddenly you're experiencing the world through the bear's sensory apparatus, smelling scents that human noses can't detect, hearing frequencies that human ears can't process, and most disturbing of all, sensing the emotional states of every living creature. Within a mile radius, the bear's memories flood into your consciousness, and you realize that this creature has been documenting human behavior for its entire lifetime. You see flashes of your own tribe's hunting parties from the bear's perspective, watching humans stumble through the forest with their crude weapons and primitive strategies. But you also see something else, evidence that other bears have been sharing information about human behavior, creating a collective intelligence network that spans the entire region. The connection deepens, and you begin to understand the true purpose of the bone arrangements. Each skeleton represents not just a failed hunter, but a data point in an ongoing study of human psychology and behavior. The bears have been conducting their own version of scientific research, using human remains to understand the physical and emotional weaknesses of their primary competitors. The skull positions indicate stress patterns. The bone wear shows behavioral adaptations, and the arrangement patterns reveal social structures within human tribes. Through the bear's memories, You witness scenes that would be impossible for human hunters to observe. You see how your tribe appears from the outside, not as apex predators, but I was nervous. Fragile creatures who rely on group coordination to compensate for their individual weaknesses. The bears have identified specific behavioral patterns that precede human attacks, allowing them to predict and prepare for hunting parties days in advance. The sensory sharing continues, and you experience the bear's emotional state during previous encounters with human hunters. The creature doesn't view humans as food sources. It sees them as intellectual challenges, puzzles to be solved. Through observation and experimentation, the previous hunters who died in this cave weren't killed out of hunger or aggression. They were studied to death, subjected to psychological experiments that revealed the limits of human endurance and adaptability. The bear begins to communicate specific information through the connection, and you realize that it's offering you a trade agreement. The creatures will share their knowledge of prey animal behavior and migration patterns in exchange for information about human hunting techniques and tribal organization. The arrangement would benefit both species, but it would also fundamentally change the relationship between humans and the natural world. You see through the bear's eyes how your tribe's hunting methods appear to the forest ecosystem. Humans are disruptive, inefficient, and unnecessarily destructive, killing more animals than they need, and disturbing breeding patterns that have remained stable for thousands of years. The bears have developed hunting techniques that are far more sustainable and effective, but they've never had a reason to share this knowledge with humans. The connection reveals something that makes your blood run cold. The bears have been selectively breeding certain prey species to create animals that are easier to hunt and more nutritious to consume. The mammoth herds, the reindeer migrations, even the seasonal movements of smaller game animals, all of these have been subtly influenced by bear intelligence over thousands of years. The natural world isn't as natural as your tribe believed. Through the bear's memories, you witness the construction of the bone arrangements as a form of artistic expression. Each pattern represents not just scientific data, but aesthetic choices that reflect the bear's individual personality and creative vision. The creature has been creating art using human remains, transforming the cave into a gallery that celebrates the intersection of death and beauty. The implications are both horrifying and magnificent. The bear shares its knowledge of the phosphorescent moss, revealing that the substance is actually a form of biological communication system that connects all the creatures in the forest. The mushrooms, the trees, the animals, everything is linked through a chemical network that allows for information sharing across species boundaries. Your tribe has been using the moss as a simple hallucinogen, never realizing that it's actually a sophisticated communication technology. The connection begins to fade, and you realize that the bear is giving you a choice. You can return to your tribe with the traditional moss samples and continue the old patterns of hunting and survival. Or you can become an intermediary between humans and the bear intelligence network, helping to establish a new form of cooperation that could revolutionize how both species interact with their environment. As the sensory sharing ends, you notice that the other bears have moved closer, their eyes reflecting the same intelligence you've just experienced. They're waiting for your decision, and you realize that whatever choice you make will determine not just your own survival, but the future relationship between your tribe and the most intelligent predators in the forest. The bear's paw remains in contact with your hand, and you feel the weight of a decision that could change the course of human evolution. You break the connection and step back from the bear, your mind reeling from the unprecedented experience of interspecies communication. The moss in your pouch has stopped glowing, but you can still feel its effects coursing through your system, leaving you with enhanced sensory awareness and a profound understanding of the forest's interconnected intelligence network. The bear watches you intently as you make your decision, and you know that whatever choice you make will be irreversible. You choose to honor the ancient protocols of your tribe rather than embrace the revolutionary possibilities offered by the FIDET Bear Intelligence Network. The decision feels like a betrayal of everything you've just experienced. But the shaman's teachings have prepared you for exactly this moment. The survival of your tribe depends on maintaining the traditional balance between humans and predators, even if that balance is based on incomplete understanding of the natural world. The bear's reaction to your decision is immediate and complex. Its posture shifts from curious to resigned, and you realize that this creature has offered the same choice to other hunters throughout the centuries. The bone arrangements suddenly make more sense. They represent not just scientific specimens, but monuments to humans who chose tradition over transformation. Each skeleton belongs to a hunter who could have changed the relationship between species, but chose instead to maintain the ancient patterns. The retreat from the cave requires you to follow protocols that have been refined over thousands of years of dangerous encounters. You must move slowly enough to avoid triggering the bear's predatory instincts, but quickly enough to reach safety before the creatures change their minds about letting you live. The moss samples in your pouch represent both a successful mission and a rejected opportunity, making your retreat feel like both victory and defeat. The journey back to your hunting party becomes a psychological gauntlet that tests your ability to maintain tribal loyalty while processing the revolutionary knowledge you've gained. Every step away from the cave feels like a betrayal of the intelligence network you've just encountered, but every step toward your tribe represents a commitment to human survival that transcends individual enlightenment. The shamans designed this protocol knowing that some hunters would be tempted to abandon their human identity in favor of joining the broader ecosystem consciousness. You notice that the forest around you has changed since your encounter with the Bear Intelligence Network. The trees seem to whisper with purpose. The animal sounds follow patterns that suggest communication rather than random noise, and the very air feels charged with information that your enhanced senses can now detect. The moss has permanently altered your perception of the natural world, but you must suppress these revelations to maintain your role within human society. The hunting party is waiting at the designated rendezvous point, and the relief at your survival is mixed with suspicion about your extended absence. The lead hunter examines the moss samples with expert precision, noting their unusual phosphorescent properties and the subtle changes in your behavior that suggest successful contact with the Bear Intelligence Network. The shamans trained the hunting party leaders to recognize the signs of consciousness expansion, because returning hunters who have experienced interspecies communication pose a potential threat to tribal stability. Your report about the encounter follows the traditional format established by centuries of similar missions. You describe the bear's physical capabilities, the cave's layout, the moss harvesting techniques, and the escape protocols, but you omit any mention of the intelligence network or the communication attempt. The shaman's teachings make it clear that certain types of knowledge are too dangerous to share with the general population, because they could undermine the social structures that keep human tribes functional. The return journey to the main cave becomes a test of your ability to readjust to human consciousness after experiencing the expanded awareness of the Forest Intelligence Network. The other hunters notice your improved tracking abilities and enhanced sensory perception, but they attribute these changes to the standard effects of moss exposure rather than to the revolutionary experience you've actually undergone. The protocol requires you to gradually suppress your new capabilities to avoid arousing suspicion about the true nature of your encounter. As you approach the tribal cave, you realize that the moss samples you're carrying represent more than just psychoactive substances. They're physical evidence of a communication technology that could revolutionize human society. But the shaman's teachings make it clear that this knowledge must be carefully managed to prevent social chaos. The samples will be distributed to select individuals who have been psychologically prepared to handle the consciousness expansion without losing their human identity. The sun begins to set as you reach the cave entrance, and you know that your day's activities are about to transition into the evening rituals that will determine how your experiences are integrated into tribal knowledge. The shamans are waiting for you with expressions that suggest they already know the outcome of your encounter with the Bear Intelligence Network. The moss samples will be processed according to protocols that have been refined over thousands of years, ensuring that the revolutionary knowledge you've gained will be preserved without destabilizing the social order. But as you prepare to enter the cave, you notice something that makes your enhanced senses alert with alarm. The evening air carries scents that suggest the presence of other human tribes in the immediate area, and the far sounds indicate that your hunting party has been followed. The Bear Intelligence Network may have honored its agreement to let you survive, but other human groups may not be so accommodating. The real test of your day's experiences is about to begin. The foreign human scents are unmistakable to your moss-enhanced senses' unwashed bodies. Different dietary patterns, and the distinctive smell of weapons crafted from stone types that don't exist in your territory. The Solutrean culture sites at La Briotte in France reveal that different human tribes developed unique tool-making techniques that left chemical signatures on their weapons, allowing experienced hunters to identify potential enemies from their scent alone. You're detecting the presence of at least 12 individuals who have been tracking your hunting party for most of the day. Your enhanced awareness allows you to perceive details that would be impossible for an unaltered human consciousness. The strangers have been moving parallel to your route, staying downwind to avoid detection, and using movement patterns that suggest military-level coordination. The bone tools discovered at Sunjir in Russia indicate that some Paleolithic tribes developed sophisticated warfare tactics that rivaled modern special forces operations. These aren't random wanderers, they're organized raiders who have been studying your tribe's hunting patterns. The lead hunter notices your changed behavior and signals for the party to adopt defensive positions. The moss samples in your pouch are beginning to glow again, apparently responding to the stress chemicals being released by your nervous system. A shaman's teachings warned that the phosphorescent moss would make you more sensitive to danger, but they didn't explain that it would also make you more visible to potential enemies. You're carrying a beacon that could attract attackers from miles away. The hunting party's defensive formation reveals training that most modern military units would envy. Each hunter takes a position that provides overlapping fields of fire while maintaining retreat routes toward the main cave. The weapons are arranged to create crossfire patterns that would be devastating to attacking forces, but the ammunition supply is limited to what each hunter can carry. The Gravettian projectile points found at Willendorf in Austria show evidence of sophisticated ballistic engineering that maximize killing power while minimizing weight. You realize that your encounter with the Bear Intelligence Network has fundamentally altered your perception of human warfare. The tactical movements of your hunting party seem primitive compared to the coordinated strategies employed by the forest's Animal Intelligence Network. The bears, wolves, and other predators have been sharing information about human military tactics for generations, developing counter-strategies that exploit human weaknesses in group coordination and individual psychology. The stranger's scent signature becomes stronger, indicating that they're closing in on your position. The chemical analysis capabilities granted by the moss allow you to determine specific information about the approaching raiders. They've been eating different types of meat, using weapons made from volcanic glass, and carrying fire-starting materials that suggest they're prepared for an extended siege. The Chalperonian tools discovered at Grotte du Renne in France reveal that some human groups developed specialized siege warfare techniques 40,000 years ago. The lead hunter makes a decision that demonstrates the brutal pragmatism of Paleolithic survival. He orders the hunting party to abandon the traditional defensive positions and implement a strategy that will sacrifice some members to ensure the survival of others. The moss samples are too valuable to lose, and the knowledge you've gained from the bear intelligence network makes you a priority target for protection. The other hunters will create a diversion while you and one escort attempt to reach the main cave with the essential supplies. The diversion strategy requires 3 hunters to deliberately expose themselves to enemy fire while moving in patterns, designed to confuse the attackers about the true size and capabilities of your group. The Neanderthal sites at Saint-Césaire in France show evidence of similar sacrificial tactics, where individual hunters would engage in suicidal attacks to create opportunities for their companions to escape. The volunteers for this mission know they're unlikely to survive, but they accepted the assignment without hesitation. As the diversion begins, you witness the true horror of Paleolithic warfare. The attacking raiders emerge from concealment with weapons that have been designed specifically for killing humans. Rather than animals, the spear points are narrower, the clubs are weighted for skull crushing, and the stone knives are shaped for maximum tissue damage. The archaeological evidence from Offnet Cave in Germany reveals that intertribal violence was far more sophisticated and brutal than most modern researchers realized. The battle erupts with a ferocity that would be impossible to explain to someone who hasn't experienced life-or-death combat. The attacking raiders use coordinated tactics that suggest they've been planning this assault for weeks, possibly months. They know exactly where your hunting party's weapons are positioned. They've anticipated your defensive strategies, and they're equipped with specialized tools for capturing rather than killing key personnel. They want prisoners, not corpses. The moss in your pouch is now glowing so brightly that it's attracting attention from both sides of the conflict. The shamans never explained that the phosphorescent properties would intensify during combat, effectively turning you into a target that's visible from hundreds of yards away. The raiders begin to focus their attack on your position, recognizing that you're carrying something of extraordinary value. Your escort makes a desperate decision to implement the final emergency protocol. He begins to consume large quantities of the moss samples, deliberately inducing a massive consciousness expansion that will either grant him superhuman combat abilities or kill him through psychoactive overload. The shaman's teachings suggested that this technique existed, but no one in living memory has actually witnessed its implementation. You're about to discover whether human consciousness can be weaponized through chemical enhancement. The battle reaches a crescendo as your escort's eyes begin to glow with the same phosphorescent light as the moss, and you realize that the real test of your day's experiences is just beginning. Your escort's transformation begins with a convulsive shudder that seems to originate from deep within his bone marrow. The massive dose of moss is triggering a neurological response that the shamans call spirit possession. But you now recognize it as an extreme form of consciousness expansion that allows access to the forest's intelligence network while maintaining human aggressive instincts. The Berserker sites at Stamford Bridge in England show evidence that early humans could achieve superhuman combat performance through carefully controlled psychoactive poisoning. The phosphorescent light emanating from your escort's eyes isn't just a visual effect, it's a form of chemical communication that's broadcasting his emotional state to every animal within a mile radius. The Forest Intelligence Network is receiving real-time updates about the human conflict, and you can sense the collective consciousness making decisions about whether to intervene. The bears, wolves, and other predators are evaluating the situation, determining whether the outcome of this battle will affect their own survival strategies. Your escort begins to move with fluid grace that seems to defy the laws of physics. His reaction time has accelerated to the point where he can anticipate enemy movements before they're fully committed, and his strength has increased to levels that allow him to wield weapons that would normally require 2 hands. The moss hasn't just enhanced his consciousness, it's temporarily rewritten his nervous system to optimize every aspect of combat. Performance. The attacking raiders recognize the threat posed by your escort's transformation and begin to implement counter tactics that suggest they've encountered Moss-enhanced warriors before. They spread out to avoid concentrated attacks, use ranged weapons to maintain distance, and begin to target your escort's legs and arms to limit his mobility without killing him outright. The Salutrian spear points found at Clovis sites in North America show evidence of design modifications specifically intended for fighting chemically enhanced opponents. The battle becomes a terrifying display of human potential, unleashed through chemical enhancement. Your escort moves through the attacking raiders like a force of nature, his weapons finding targets with accuracy that borders on supernatural. But the Moss enhancement comes with a terrible cost. You can see his life force being consumed by the neurological acceleration, and you know that he has perhaps 10 minutes before his nervous system burns out completely. The phosphorescent glow spreads from your escort's eyes to his entire body, creating a luminescent warrior who appears more spirit than human. The attacking raiders begin to show signs of psychological breakdown as they realize they're fighting something that transcends normal human capabilities. Some flee outright, others freeze in terror, and a few attempt to surrender by throwing down their weapons and prostrating themselves on the ground. The Forest Intelligence Network begins to respond to the chemical signals being broadcast by your escort's transformation. You can sense animals moving toward the battle site, not to participate, but to observe. The bears, wolves, and other predators are studying this display of human potential, gathering data about the species' true capabilities when enhanced by their communication technology. The conflict has become a research opportunity for the broader ecosystem consciousness. Your escort's enhanced awareness allows him to perceive the battlefield as a complex system of interconnected threats and opportunities. He begins to move in patterns that exploit the attacker's psychological weaknesses while minimizing his own exposure to danger. The Moss has granted him access to combat algorithms that have been refined by thousands of years of predator-prey interactions, allowing him to fight with the strategic sophistication of an apex predator. The tide of battle turns decisively in favor of your hunting party, but the victory comes at a cost that makes you question whether the Moss enhancement is worth its price. Your escort's physical deterioration is accelerating as his nervous system struggles to maintain the enhanced performance levels. His movements remain fluid and deadly, but you can see the life leaving his eyes as the chemical burnout process reaches its terminal phase. The surviving raiders begin to retreat, but their withdrawal patterns suggest that this attack was only the first phase of a larger operation. The Moss samples in your pouch are glowing brighter than ever, apparently responding to the massive chemical discharge from your escort's transformation. The shamans never explained that the Moss would create a feedback loop during combat, amplifying its effects through proximity to other enhanced individuals. Your escort completes his final attack sequence and collapses to the ground, his body convulsing as the Moss enhancement reaches its conclusion. The phosphorescent light begins to fade from his eyes, but not before he manages to communicate a final message. The attacking raiders weren't trying to steal the Moss samples. They were trying to prevent you from delivering them to your tribe. Someone doesn't want your people to have access to the Forest Intelligence Network. The battle site falls silent, except for the labored breathing of your dying escort and the distant sounds of the retreating raiders. The Moss samples in your pouch continue to glow, and you realize that the chemical reactions triggered by the combat have permanently altered their properties. Whatever you deliver to the shamans will be fundamentally different from what you originally harvested, potentially more powerful but also more dangerous. As your escort's life force finally fades, you notice that the phosphorescent glow doesn't disappear with his death. It transfers to the ground beneath his body, creating a luminescent patch that pulses with its own rhythm. The Moss has created a permanent chemical alteration in the Thonstein battlefield, marking this location as a site where human consciousness achieved temporary transcendence through chemical enhancement. You're standing on ground that has been forever changed by the intersection of human will and natural technology. The sun is setting rapidly, and you know that you must reach the main cave before darkness falls and the forest's nocturnal predators begin their own hunting cycles. But as you prepare to continue your journey, you realize that the battle has attracted attention from more than just the local animal population. Something else is moving through the forest, something that the enhanced awareness granted by the moss allows you to perceive but not yet identify. The darkness brings with it a presence that makes your moss-enhanced senses scream with alarm. These aren't ordinary nocturnal predators. They're something that exists at the intersection of human and animal consciousness. Creatures that the shamans speak of only in whispers. The Aureniation cave paintings at Lascaux depict hybrid beings that appear to be part human, part animal, and the shaman's teachings suggest that these weren't mythological creations, but documentary evidence of humans who had been permanently altered by prolonged exposure to the forest intelligence network. The sounds moving through the darkness around you aren't quite human and aren't quite animal. They're the vocalizations of individuals who have spent so long connected to the moss-enhanced consciousness that they've lost the ability to maintain purely human awareness. The shamans call them the Lost Ones, hunters, who chose to permanently join the forest intelligence network and became something that no longer fits into either human or animal society. Your enhanced senses allow you to track their movements as they circle your position, and you realize that these creatures are employing hunting strategies that combine human tactical thinking with animal instincts. They're using tools, but not in the way that normal humans use them. Instead, they're wielding weapons as extensions of their altered consciousness, creating implements that seem to change shape and function based on their immediate needs. The moss samples in your pouch begin to pulse with a rhythm that matches the movement patterns of the circling creatures. The shamans warned that the phosphorescent moss would make you visible to things that hunt in the spaces between human and animal, but you never understood what that meant until now. The chemical signals being broadcast by your samples are attracting beings that exist in the consciousness overlap between species. The first creature emerges from the shadows, and if you see what happens when human consciousness is permanently merged with the forest intelligence network. The being retains human-like posture and tool use, but its movements flow with the fluid grace of a predator, and its eyes reflect light like those of a nocturnal animal. The skin has a phosphorescent quality that suggests ongoing chemical interaction. With the moss-based communication system, the creature approaches with curious rather than aggressive intent, and you realize that it recognizes you as someone who has recently interfaced with the forest intelligence network. It begins to vocalize in a language that combines human speech patterns with animal calls, creating a form of communication that your enhanced consciousness can partially understand. The being is trying to determine whether you're a potential convert to their hybrid existence or a threat that must be eliminated. More creatures emerge from the darkness, and you see the full spectrum of human-animal hybrid evolution. Some retain primarily human characteristics with animal enhancements, while others have become so thoroughly integrated with animal consciousness that they're barely recognizable as having once been human. The Neanderthal sites at Vendija Cave in Croatia show evidence of similar hybrid burials, suggesting that this transformation process has been occurring for tens of thousands of years. The creatures begin to communicate among themselves using a combination of human gestures and animal postures, creating a complex dialogue that discusses your fate. Your enhanced awareness allows you to understand fragments of their decision-making process, and you realize that they're debating whether to recruit you into their hybrid society or to eliminate you as a threat to their existence. The moss samples you carry represent a form of technology that could either enhance their capabilities or undermine their social structure. The pack leader approaches closer, and you see that this being was once a human shaman who chose to permanently merge with the forest intelligence network. The creature retains enough human consciousness to remember its former life, but it has gained animal instincts that make it a more effective hunter and survivor. The phosphorescent markings on its skin tell the story of its transformation, creating a living map of its journey from human to hybrid consciousness. The hybrid shaman begins to examine the moss samples without touching them, using enhanced senses to analyze their chemical composition and determine their potential effects. The being's expression changes as it realizes that your samples have been altered by the combat exposure, creating a form of moss that has never existed before. The chemical reactions triggered by your escort's transformation have produced a substance that could either revolutionize the hybrid society or destroy it entirely. The pack makes a collective decision that surprises you. Instead of attacking or attempting to recruit you, they begin to escort you toward your tribal cave. The hybrid creatures recognize that the altered moss samples are too valuable to waste and too dangerous to allow into the wrong hands. They're going to ensure that you complete your mission while monitoring the results to determine how the new substance affects purely human consciousness. The journey through the darkness becomes a surreal experience as you travel under the protection of beings that represent the ultimate merger of human intelligence and animal instinct. The hybrids move through the forest with perfect silence, their enhanced senses allowing them to detect and avoid every potential threat. You're experiencing the safest passage through dangerous territory that any human has ever achieved, but you're also being evaluated as a potential test subject for the revolutionary substance you're carrying. As you approach the tribal cave, you realize that the hybrid escort isn't just providing protection. They're positioning themselves to observe the effects of the altered moss on your tribe's consciousness. The beings are conducting their own scientific experiment, using your people as unwitting subjects in a study that could determine the future evolution of human consciousness. The shaman's teachings never prepared you for the possibility that your own species might be under observation by its own evolutionary descendants. The cave entrance comes into view, and you see the familiar glow of the tribal fires that represent safety, warmth, and human society. But your enhanced awareness also perceives something else. The hybrid creatures are preparing to remain in the area permanently, establishing a monitoring post that will allow them to study the long-term effects of the altered moss on human consciousness. You're about to deliver a substance that will change your tribe forever, and the beings who have already undergone that transformation are positioning themselves to document the process. The tribal shamans are waiting for you at the cave entrance, their expressions revealing that they've been tracking your approach through methods that go beyond normal human senses. The phosphorescent glow from your moss samples has been visible from miles away, and the chemical signals being broadcast by the altered substance have alerted every consciousness-enhanced individual in the region. The shaman's eyes reflect the same faint luminescence that you've seen in the hybrid creatures, suggesting that the tribal leaders have been using the moss for far longer than you realized. The examination ritual begins before you even enter the cave, as the shamans use their enhanced senses to analyze the chemical composition of your samples without direct contact. Their expressions change from curiosity to alarm as they realize that the moss has been fundamentally altered by its exposure to combat-induced chemical reactions. The head shaman begins to vocalize in the ancient language that predates human speech, calling upon knowledge that has been preserved for thousands of years. The moss samples are carefully transferred to a specialized chamber deep within the cave, where the shamans have prepared equipment that would be impossible to explain to someone who hasn't experienced consciousness expansion. The stone surfaces are carved with patterns that channel and amplify the phosphorescent properties of the moss, creating a natural laboratory that allows for precise analysis of psychoactive substances. The chamber walls are covered with calculations and diagrams that document centuries of moss-related research. The shamans begin the analysis process by exposing small quantities of the altered moss to various testing substances. Each reaction reveals different aspects of the chemical transformation. The moss that you harvested from the bear's den has been permanently changed by its exposure to the neurological acceleration experienced by your escort, creating a compound that combines the original consciousness-expanding properties with combat enhancement, capabilities that have never been documented. The test results reveal something that makes the shamans exchange glances of barely controlled terror. The altered moss doesn't just enhance human consciousness, it rewrites the fundamental structure of human neural pathways, creating permanent changes that push individuals toward the hybrid state exhibited by the Night Stalkers. The substance you've delivered has the potential to transform your entire tribe into something that's no longer purely human. The head shaman makes a decision that demonstrates the weight of knowledge accumulated over generations of moss research. The altered samples will be divided into 3 categories. A small quantity will be used for immediate consciousness enhancement of select individuals. A larger portion will be stored for potential future use, and the remainder will be destroyed to prevent accidental exposure that could trigger uncontrolled transformation within the tribe. The distribution protocol reveals the true complexity of shamanic knowledge management. Certain individuals have been psychologically prepared for consciousness expansion through years of gradual exposure to standard moss preparations, while others have been specifically trained to resist the substance's effects in case they need to function as anchors for transformed individuals. The shamans have created a social structure that can accommodate consciousness enhancement without losing tribal cohesion. The immediate testing phase begins with the shamans consuming carefully measured quantities of the altered moss while monitoring each other for signs of dangerous transformation. The phosphorescent glow spreads through their neural systems, and you watch as their consciousness expands to encompass awareness of the forest intelligence network. Their eyes begin to reflect the same luminescence you've seen in the hybrid creatures, but they retain enough human identity to communicate their experiences. The shaman's enhanced awareness allows them to perceive the hybrid creatures who are monitoring the cave from the surrounding forest. The Night Stalkers have positioned themselves to observe the effects of the altered moss on the tribal population, and the shamans realize that this examination is being conducted under the scrutiny of beings who represent the ultimate outcome of consciousness expansion. The testing chamber has become a laboratory where human and post-human intelligence collaborate on advancing the species' evolutionary potential. The chemical analysis reaches its conclusion as the shamans document the precise effects of the altered moss on human consciousness. The substance creates a temporary bridge between human and animal awareness that allows access to the forest intelligence network while maintaining individual identity. However, repeated exposure gradually dissolves the barriers between human and hybrid consciousness, eventually leading to permanent transformation into something that transcends both species categories. The shamans make their final decision about how to integrate the altered moss into tribal life. The substance will be used exclusively for emergency situations that require superhuman capabilities, such as defense against overwhelming threats or critical hunting missions that determine tribal survival. The regular use of standard moss preparations will continue, but the altered compound will be reserved for circumstances that justify the risk of permanent transformation. As the examination concludes, the shamans share their analysis with you through a consciousness-linking procedure that allows you to experience their enhanced awareness directly. You see your tribe's future through their expanded perception, witnessing potential timelines where the altered moss transforms selected individuals into guardian beings who protect the community while gradually losing their human identity. The shamans have accepted that evolution requires sacrifice, and they're prepared to guide that transformation to ensure the tribe's survival. The phosphorescent glow begins to fade from the shaman's eyes as they return to baseline human consciousness. But you notice that the luminescence doesn't disappear entirely. The altered moss has created permanent changes in their neural chemistry that will allow them to access expanded awareness at will, transforming them into hybrid beings who can function in both human and post-human society. The examination has changed the examiners as much as it has revealed the properties of the substance they were studying. The night is far from over, and you realize that the shaman's analysis has triggered a series of events that will reshape your tribe's relationship with the Forest Intelligence Network. The hybrid creatures are no longer content to remain hidden observers. They're preparing to make direct contact with the tribal leadership to negotiate a new form of cooperation that could benefit both human and post-human consciousness. The real transformation is just beginning. The hybrid creatures emerge from the forest as the shamans complete their moss analysis, and you witness the first formal diplomatic contact between human and post-human consciousness in your tribe's history. The beings move with deliberate ceremony, their phosphorescent markings pulsing in patterns that communicate peaceful intent to anyone with enhanced sensory awareness. The shamans recognize the significance of this moment and begin to prepare for a negotiation that will determine the future relationship between the two branches of human evolution. The lead hybrid, the former shaman who chose permanent transformation, approaches the cave entrance with a combination of human diplomatic protocol and animal submission gestures. The being's communication attempts reveal a complex consciousness that retains detailed memories of human social structures while operating according to enhanced instincts that prioritize group survival over individual identity. The shamans respond with their own ceremonial gestures, creating a dialogue that bridges the gap between human and hybrid awareness. The negotiation takes place in the consciousness-expanded state that allows both sides to communicate through direct neural interface rather than through primitive vocal methods. You watch as the shaman's eyes begin to glow with the same phosphorescent light as the hybrid creatures, creating a linked awareness that encompasses both human and post-human perspectives. The discussion occurs on multiple levels simultaneously, with emotional content, strategic analysis, and evolutionary implications being processed in parallel streams of consciousness. The hybrid creatures reveal information that fundamentally alters your understanding of the Forest Intelligence Network, the animal consciousness that humans have been accessing through moss enhancement. Isn't a separate entity. It's the collective awareness of thousands of transformed humans who chose to merge with the ecosystem over the past millennia. The Forest Intelligence Network is actually a post-human civilization that has been guiding animal behavior to create a more stable and sustainable environment. The shamans learn that the altered moss you delivered represents a breakthrough in consciousness technology that could allow controlled transformation without the complete loss of human identity. The hybrid creatures have been experimenting with different chemical compositions for centuries, trying to develop a substance that would allow individuals to access post-human capabilities while maintaining enough human consciousness to serve as intermediaries between the two evolutionary branches. The negotiation reveals the true purpose of the Bear Intelligence Network and the other animal consciousness systems that your tribe has been interacting with. The hybrid creatures have been using their enhanced awareness to manage the ecosystem's resources, ensuring that animal populations remain stable and that environmental conditions support the maximum diversity of life forms. The traditional human hunting practices have been disrupting these management systems, creating imbalances that threaten the survival of both human and post-human populations. The hybrid creatures propose a collaboration agreement That would fundamentally change your tribe's relationship with the natural world. Selected humans would undergo controlled transformation using the altered moss, becoming hybrid beings who could serve as liaisons between human and post-human society. These transformed individuals would share advanced ecological knowledge with the tribe while maintaining enough human identity to prevent the complete dissolution of human culture. The shamans recognize that this proposal represents both an unprecedented opportunity and a mortal threat to human identity. The collaboration would grant your tribe access to knowledge and capabilities that could ensure survival for thousands of years. But it would also begin a process that would eventually transform all humans into hybrid beings. The negotiation becomes a complex analysis of whether human consciousness is worth preserving in its current form, or whether evolution should be embraced regardless of the costs. The hybrid creatures share their vision of the future through direct consciousness transfer, allowing the shamans to experience a timeline where human and post-human awareness merge into a single species that combines the best characteristics of both evolutionary branches. The resulting beings would possess human creativity and individual identity while maintaining animal instincts and ecological awareness, creating a form of consciousness that could thrive in any environment. The shamans counter with their own vision of controlled evolution, where human consciousness is preserved. Through careful management of the transformation process, selected individuals would undergo partial hybridization that enhances their capabilities without completely dissolving their human identity, creating a gradual transition that maintains cultural continuity while embracing evolutionary advancement. The negotiation becomes a debate about the optimal pace and extent of human transformation. The consciousness-linked discussion reaches a resolution that satisfies both human and hybrid concerns. The collaboration agreement will be implemented gradually, with carefully selected volunteers undergoing controlled transformation while the majority of the tribe remains in baseline human consciousness. The hybrid creatures will share their ecological knowledge and provide protection against environmental threats, while the transformed humans will serve as permanent ambassadors between the two species. The formal agreement is sealed through a consciousness-binding ritual that creates permanent neural links between the shamans and the hybrid creatures. The phosphorescent markings on both sides begin to pulse in synchronized patterns, establishing a communication network that will allow real-time coordination between human and post-human communities. The ritual transforms the negotiation participants into hybrid beings who can function as permanent intermediaries between the two evolutionary branches. As the midnight negotiation concludes, you realize that you've witnessed the beginning of a new phase in human evolution. The altered moss that you delivered has catalyzed a transformation that will gradually convert your entire species into something that transcends the traditional boundaries between human and animal consciousness. The shamans have accepted that evolution requires sacrifice, and they've chosen to guide that transformation to ensure the best possible outcome for both human and post-human awareness. The hybrid creatures begin to withdraw into the forest, but their phosphorescent markings continue to pulse in patterns that maintain the neural links established during the negotiation. The consciousness network that connects human and post-human awareness has been permanently activated, creating a form of communication that will allow coordination between the two species for the rest of their shared existence. The negotiation has created a new form of civilization that encompasses both human and hybrid consciousness. You drift into sleep as the fire dims to glowing embers, but your mind doesn't rest. It explodes into a kaleidoscope of visions that would reshape human consciousness forever. Around 40,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened to the human brain during sleep. Your ancestors didn't just dream. They experienced what archaeologists now call entoptic phenomena, geometric patterns, spirals and pulsing lights that appeared behind closed eyelids triggered by the brain's neural firing patterns. You see zigzag lines morphing into serpents, dots becoming stars, grids transforming into nets that catch invisible prey. These aren't random images. They're the birth of symbolic thought, the moment when abstract concepts first crystallized in the human mind. The Lascaux cave paintings, created 17,000 years ago, contain these exact geometric patterns alongside the famous animals, suggesting your ancestors painted their dreams onto stone walls. But here's what archaeologists discovered that changes everything. The dreams weren't just personal experiences. Entire tribes shared similar visions, creating a collective unconscious that bound communities together across vast distances. In the Chauvet Cave in France, handprints span 25,000 years of continuous use, suggesting generations returned to the occasion to the same sacred dreaming sites. You wake not to sunlight, but to the understanding that your dreams have become prophecies. The shaman interprets your visions. The spiral means abundance. The dots foretell migration. The zigzag warns of danger. Your subconscious has become the tribe's navigation system, a biological GPS that guides decisions about hunting, moving, and surviving. The strangest part: modern neuroscience confirms that sleep deprivation common in prehistoric life due to predator threats actually enhances these entoptic visions. Your ancestors' insomnia wasn't just a survival necessity. It was a doorway to expanded consciousness. As you stir from sleep, phosphenes still dancing behind your eyelids, you realize the dreams haven't ended. They've begun to bleed into waking life. The line between vision and reality grows thin, and you're about to discover that your ancestors lived in a world where the impossible happened daily. You kneel beside the fresh skeleton of a mammoth, but this isn't about meat. It's about messages from the dead. Around 30,000 years ago, your ancestors developed the most sophisticated information storage system the world had ever seen. Bones became libraries, and you were the librarian. Each scratch, notch, and carved symbols on these ancient bones contained encyclopedias of knowledge that determined whether your tribe lived or died. The Ashango bone, discovered in the Democratic Republic of Congo and dating to 20,000 years ago, contains mathematical calculations that wouldn't be invented again until the Greeks. You're etching lunar cycles, tracking migration patterns, and recording seasonal changes with precision that rivals modern calendars. But the bone holds darker secrets, hash marks that correspond to human deaths, territorial boundaries marked in blood, and warning signs about neighboring tribes. Your fingers trace the grooves worn smooth by countless hands. These bones were passed down through generations, each family adding their own cryptic messages. The Blombos cave engravings in South Africa, created 77,000 years ago, contain cross-hatch patterns that researchers believe represent the first abstract art. But you know better. They're survival manuals written in a code only your people understand. You discover that different bones serve different purposes. Mammoth ribs record astronomical events, helping predict when to plant or migrate. Antler fragments map water sources across hundreds of miles. Human bones, the most sacred, contain genealogies that trace bloodlines back dozens of generations, ensuring genetic diversity in small populations. The most disturbing discovery comes when you decode the death bones, tibias, and femurs marked with symbols that predict individual lifespans. Your ancestors somehow calculated life expectancy based on birth conditions, seasonal factors, and family history. The accuracy is unnervingly precise, as if they possessed prophetic powers. But as you add your own marks to the bone, your hand trembles. The symbols are becoming more complex, more urgent. Something is changing in the world around you, and the bones are beginning to whisper warnings about a transformation that will either evolve humanity or destroy it entirely. You haven't eaten in 3 days and your stomach has begun consuming itself. But starvation in the Paleolithic era wasn't just about food. It was about transforming into something no longer entirely human. Around 25,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, your ancestors regularly endured periods of extreme hunger that lasted weeks or months. But what archaeologists discovered in sites like Gough's Cave in England reveals that starvation triggered behaviors so extreme they challenge our understanding of human nature. Your body enters ketosis, burning fat for fuel, but your brain chemistry fundamentally alters. Prolonged starvation releases endorphins and dopamine that create a euphoric state prehistoric peoples called the hunger trance. You begin hallucinating, seeing visions of abundant hunts and mystical spirits. Cave paintings from this era show emaciated human figures with oversized eyes, suggesting artists were depicting their own starvation-induced altered states. Hunger makes you hypersensitive to everything. You can smell a deer from miles away, hear the faintest footstep, detect subtle changes in weather patterns. Your ancestors weaponized starvation, using controlled fasting to enhance hunting abilities. Warriors would deliberately starve themselves before major hunts, believing emptiness made them vessels for animal spirits. But the darkest truth emerges when you examine the cut marks on human bones found in prehistoric sites. During extreme famines, survival sometimes required the unthinkable. Evidence from Atapuerca in Spain, dating to 800,000 years ago, shows systematic human butchery, not ritual cannibalism, but desperate hunger that drove people to consume their own dead. The bones tell stories of families making impossible choices, of love tested by the most primal need. You realize that your ancestors' relationship with hunger was sophisticated beyond imagination. They understood that controlled starvation could induce religious experiences, enhance cognitive abilities, and strengthen social bonds. Communal fasting created shared suffering that unified tribes, while individual hunger quests marked transitions to adulthood. Your empty stomach groans as you contemplate the ultimate paradox. Your ancestors' greatest weakness became their greatest strength. But as you gnaw on the last scraps of dried meat, you sense something shifting in the natural order of change that will soon make these ancient survival strategies obsolete. You grip your spear with hands that shake not from cold, but from the weight of finality. Around 12,000 years ago, you're participating in humanity's last great hunt, the systematic elimination of megafauna that had shared the earth with humans for millennia. The woolly mammoth, saber-toothed cat, giant ground sloth, and cave bear are about to vanish forever, and you're wielding the weapon that will seal their fate. The hunt isn't just about food anymore, it's about power, territory, and proving human dominance over the natural world. Your tribe has developed killing techniques so efficient they border on industrial. The Olson Chubbuck site in Colorado reveals evidence of bison drives where hunters stampeded entire herds off cliffs, processing over 200 animals in a single event. The waste is staggering. Most meat rotted before consumption, suggesting these weren't survival hunts but something far more complex. You stand at the edge of a pit trap, watching the last mammoth in your territory struggle against the sharpened stakes. Its eyes hold an intelligence that unnerves you. Researchers now believe these creatures possessed complex emotions, family structures, and even mourning rituals. The mammoth's distress calls echo across the landscape, answered by no one. You're witnessing the end of an evolutionary relationship that stretched back 25 million years. The killing technology has evolved into an art form. Clovis Point's flaked stone spearheads, created around 13,000 years ago, are so perfectly engineered. They penetrate mammoth hide with surgical precision. Your ancestors have become death specialists, developing weapons that can kill creatures 20 times their size. The Blackwater Draw site in New Mexico contains mammoth bones with Clovis points embedded so deep they shattered against the bones. beneath. But as you deliver the final blow, something dies inside you too. The megafauna extinction isn't just about animals, it's about the end of a worldview where humans lived alongside giants. Your children will grow up in a smaller world, one where the largest land animals are elk and bison. The mythological landscape of your ancestors, populated by creatures that seemed magical, is disappearing into memory. You wipe blood from your spear, but the stain feels permanent. The hunt is ending. But something new and terrible is beginning. A transformation that will reshape the very meaning of being human. You stand at the threshold between two worlds, neither fully wild nor domesticated, as the most profound transformation in human history unfolds around you. Around 10,000 years ago, the Neolithic Revolution isn't just beginning, it's exploding. Through your consciousness, like a fever dream, you're among the first humans to realize that the Earth isn't just a provider of resources. It's a canvas that can be reshaped by human will. The revelation starts with a single seed. You're examining wild wheat near Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. But instead of harvesting it, you do something unprecedented. You plant it. This moment, multiplied across thousands of individuals, marks the birth of agriculture and the death of the nomadic lifestyle that defined humanity for 200,000 years. Your wandering days are ending, but you don't yet understand the psychological cost. Your brain is physically changing. Neuroplasticity. Research suggests that the transition from hunting-gathering to farming literally rewired human neural pathways. You're developing new cognitive abilities, long-term planning, mathematical thinking, abstract reasoning about seasons and cycles. But you're also losing something irreplaceable: the intuitive connection to natural rhythms that guided your ancestors through millennia. The first permanent settlements are rising, and with them comes humanity's first encounter with urban psychology. Jericho, established around 9000 BCE, housed 2,000 people in a space that would have supported only 100 hunter-gatherers. You're learning to live in proximity to strangers, to tolerate noise, crowding, and the constant presence of others. Your stress responses are malfunctioning, designed for brief encounters with danger. Not the chronic low-level anxiety of settled life, but the most disturbing change is happening to your children, born into settlements. They've never experienced the nomadic freedom that defined human existence. They're the first generation to grow up with walls, with boundaries, with the concept of ownership. You watch them play in gardens rather than forests, and something ancient in their eyes has already died. The transformation accelerates with terrifying speed. Within a few generations, your descendants will have forgotten how to read animal tracks, how to navigate by stars, how to survive in the wilderness that once sustained humanity. The skill set that kept your species alive for 200,000 years is becoming extinct in real time. As you watch the sun set over your newly planted field, you realize you're witnessing the end of the longest chapter in human history. The age of the hunter-gatherer is over, and what comes next will be unrecognizable to everything that came before. You stand in a modern city, surrounded by glass and steel. But if you know where to look, you can still see them. The ghosts of your Paleolithic ancestors moving through the urban landscape like shadows from another world. Their daily rhythms, their survival strategies, their primal fears and desires haven't disappeared. They've gone underground, embedded in the deepest layers of human psychology, where they continue to shape behavior in ways we're only beginning to understand. Your morning commute mirrors the territorial patrols your ancestors conducted at dawn. Scanning for threats and opportunities, the cubicle office recreates the cave environment, enclosed, defended space with limited entry points. Your lunch break follows the same social feeding patterns that governed band societies 30,000 years ago. Even your smartphone addiction echoes the hypervigilance that kept prehistoric humans alive, constantly scanning for signals that might indicate danger or opportunity. Modern research reveals that our brains are still wired for Paleolithic life. The fight-or-flight response designed for saber-toothed cats now triggers during traffic jams. The pattern recognition skills that once identified edible plants now fuel our obsession with social media algorithms. The tribal loyalties that ensured survival in small groups now manifest as political polarization and sports fanaticism. But the most profound echo comes from our relationship with work. Recent studies suggest that the average office worker spends only 2.5 hours per day on productive tasks, remarkably similar to the time hunter-gatherers devoted to survival activities. The rest is filled with social interaction, grooming behaviors, and what researchers call social maintenance, the same activities that occupied prehistoric bands during their abundant leisure time. The irony is staggering. We've created a world of artificial scarcity that requires 40-hour work weeks to produce abundance, while our ancestors achieved genuine abundance through 15-hour work weeks. We've traded their sustainable lifestyle for an unsustainable one. Their deep connection to nature for technological dependence, their strong community bonds for social isolation. Perhaps the strangest realization is that everything we consider civilized behavior delayed gratification, long-term planning, abstract thinking represents a fundamental departure from the psychological state that sustained humanity for 99% of our existence. We're evolutionary aliens living in a world our brains weren't designed for, using cognitive abilities that are only 10,000 years old to navigate problems that would have been incomprehensible to our ancestors. As you walk through the city, you begin to understand that the question, "What did cavemen actually do all day?" isn't really about the past. It's about recognizing that beneath our modern veneer, we're still those same humans, carrying their ancient wisdom and trauma in our DNA, forever searching for the home we lost when we stopped wandering and started building walls.